Hi, I'm Nicole, and today I'm going to be doing my March reading wrap-up. This month I read 5 books, and 2 of them were audiobooks. The first book I got through this month was The Sun Is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon, and it was a fun little story. It's a YA story about a girl named Natasha who, for reasons which will be revealed throughout the story, is going to be deported from the US, and a guy named Daniel, whose family owns a shop in the same area as Natasha, and they cross paths in New York. The whole thing takes place in a day, so everything's very fast, and that means that since it is basically a YA romance, definitely heavy insta-love. They basically fall in love in a day, so if you don't like insta-love, this is not going to be the story for you. I don't particularly like it, I don't particularly not like it. I just thought I'd pick this up and see what it was like, and it was okay. I listened on audiobook, and the narrator for Natasha is Banny Turpin, who is the same narrator for The Hate U Give, and that made it a little bit confusing for me at first, just because the characters are kind of similar. It's kind of headstrong, slightly angry protagonist, which seems to be the main way in a lot of these stories to show an independent woman who's not a damsel in distress kind of character. And I feel like there's some room for growth to be done in that area, because I really don't feel like the only way to show an independent female character is for her to be, I don't know, a bit aggressive. One of the main things that I particularly liked about this story's format was the omniscient narrator. So with the use of that, we were able to kind of peek into some of the secondary characters' lives a little bit, and I thought that was really interesting because it helped to flesh out some of the other characters, and it expanded the world really well. Would I recommend it? I think if you already like these kinds of books, yes, definitely. If you are really not bothered about this kind of story, then I don't know. And then the book that I read after that was a lot heavier, a lot drier, and more difficult for me to get through, even though it was also an audiobook, and that was The Female Eunuch by Germaine Greer. Now, I feel like I can't really say anything bad about this book because, for me, I was kind of drifting in and out as I was listening, and I found myself playing back bits because I just was not focusing on it, like, hardly at all. But it wasn't necessarily a bad book or anything, I just didn't really feel that connection with it. It felt like it was punctuated with interesting moments, and that's when I would tune back in, but overall it didn't really hold my attention that well. I also found it really jarring the way that she used a lot of coarse language in the book. Not that I have a problem with swearing or anything like that, but there were a lot of instances of racial slurs or homophobic slurs that were used, I suppose, for emphasis. But I just didn't feel like it was effective. It just felt heavy and unnecessary and just kind of jarring. So that didn't go over well with me, but I've considered rereading the book because, like I said, I didn't really pay really close attention to it when I was listening. But I'm also not sure if I will reread or re-listen, because I'm not convinced that it has that much there to offer me necessarily. We'll see. After that, I read this little book, which it's neon, so I'm not sure it'll show up that well on camera, but it's actually pink, not salmon, which is what it looks like in my screen. And it's called Amours, and it's an activity book. I actually came across it because a friend of mine found it, and since I'm one of the first people that she thought of who speaks French and would actually understand it because it's all in French, she thought that I might like it, and she gave it to me, and I loved it. It was really, really cute, but also very profound in its own way. Like I said, it's an activity book, and it's filled with lots of cool illustrations and activities to do, and it's just really sweet. It's got loads of like games and things to work through. The questions in it were really good, like what is love, or what will falling in love do to me, or can a boy love a boy, and different little exercises to find out about, I guess, the different aspects of love. For one of the games in it, you get lots of cards with different traits on them, and you have to put together lots of traits that your ideal person would have, but then you also have to include one negative trait because nobody is perfect, obviously. And I think it's just really sweet. It's aged, I think, 8 and up, so it's for quite a young audience, but it's also, like I said, it's profound in its own little way, and I think it simplifies the idea of love without feeling like it's pandering in any way. And because I liked it so much, I looked up the publisher, and they do a whole series of these kinds of books. So I think I might start a little collection, possibly. Then, in a completely different direction, I finished Why I Write by George Orwell. This one, very sassy, socio-political commentary about what was happening at the time with Hitler and responses from different areas of the British public. And this was really, really interesting. I learned a lot for sure, but also it was interesting to see how much of this is still relevant, and reading his assessment of what will probably happen, what will possibly happen, what needs to happen, and comparing that to what we have or haven't done and where we are now since his time. I really like George Orwell's writing, so I'm gonna continue picking them up from time to time. On my shelves I have 3 books of his at the moment, and that is Decline of the English Murder, Books versus Cigarettes, and the third one, which is in my bedroom, is Burmese Days. And if you have read any of those and feel like I should really immediately pick up one of them over the others or anything, then please let me know. So the last book that I read in the month of March, and I actually only just finished it yesterday, was a book club read for the Feminist Orchestra Book Club, and that was Feminism Is For Everybody by Bell Hooks. This was actually the second book that I've read with a book club now. The first one was sort of an accident. I was already reading Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race, and that happened to be the book club pick for Emma Watson's book club, so I thought, oh, I'll maybe follow along some of the discussion, but I didn't really end up following along with much. I just kind of happened to be reading at the same time. So this time I've been a lot more involved and trying to take part in the discussion, and it's been really interesting hearing other people's perspectives and looking at how my views fit into that. I don't really want to say too much here because I am planning on doing a video specifically for reviewing that book, but I will say that I did like it, and I also really liked the experience of reading it with a book club. And I think probably I would not have assessed quite so much or highlighted quite so much had I not read with the book club, and that's both good and bad. I think in one way probably I've been more critical of it in certain respects, but in another way I think I've probably got more out of it for doing so. So that's something I would definitely recommend. So those are the books that I read in the month of March, and somehow I find myself now with only 3 books that I'm currently reading instead of 7 or 8, which I think I had not long ago. So that's great. I'm gonna try to keep it to that and see how things go. Let me know if you've read anything really good in March that you would recommend to me, even though I'm not really supposed to be buying that many books. And I'll see you again next time. Bye!